Our perception of what bass do or what we think bass do is often so far from reality, and it's because of our out of the water perspective. We don't live down there. We're on the shoreline, we're on the deck of a boat, and that has a huge influence on what we think is going on. Well, after watching this, I think it's going to drastically alter the way you think about bass fishing. My hope is you start to catch a lot more bass because of it. Let me give you an example. When we catch a bass off of a dock or a laydown or a little clump of weeds, from our perspective, we feel like that fish was just sitting there and just waiting for us to come by, gonna hold on that little clump of weeds all day long. And absolutely, sometimes that is true. But more often than not, what I see from all the just hundreds of hours from filming underwater is that bass are on the move way more than we realize. When we catch that fish on that laydown or on that clump of weeds or on that dock, yes, it could have been just sitting right there, but so often what I've seen is that it is moving through that particular spot. And if you have larger pieces of cover, let's say a big laydown, that bass could be kind of circling around down there at the end of it, moving from one part of that laydown to another, not always just sitting there. This bay right here is a perfect example. I've seen this so many times where bass will sit here and just roam right down the shoreline, get to the end of this bay and turn right around and come back. And the part of bass movement that we often get confused with is when we think about migration or long distance migration. Yeah, there's times a year when bass are going to cover a pretty decent amount of water, and you've always got some fish that just make huge movements. But the vast majority of them that I have seen is they like to hang out in an area and then move within that area. So how does this hold our fishing back, and what can we do to make the most of this bass behavior? Well, as anglers, we are super sight oriented. It's only natural. We see that stick in the water, or we see that clump of rocks, or the current coming by a dock, and man, we're right there. We target that spot. Makes perfect sense. We're visual creatures. Well, we need to be thinking about those spots in a larger area. So what we can't do is dismiss that water between what visually we are seeing. So I've got a dock right here and a lay down right here, and there may be 30, 40 yards of water between them. We don't want to just jump from one to the other. We want to take the time to go ahead and hit that water in between them with the assumption that the bass are moving, they aren't sitting. So we're going to grab some different lures, some different presentations to target those in between areas, and then we get to what is visually appealing to us. Then we can go ahead and change it up and slow it down to whatever our preferred method is for that particular type of cover. So for me, in between areas, I almost exclusively go with swimming type or horizontal type presentations. This could be burning little square bills, could be your swim baits, your swim jigs, swimming worms, these types of things. I want it up in the water column just a little bit because I want to cover some water. So I'm going to kind of move through it with horizontal presentations till I get to that next visually appealing thing that I want to hit up in front of me. And the key part there in these in-between areas where bass are often moving and migrating through from one spot to another, fishing it parallel makes such a huge difference because your lure is in the zone for much, much, much longer. You can do this as a bank angler. It is more challenging, but when we stand on the shoreline, our natural instinct is just to throw it straight out and bring it back in. And oftentimes that works, especially when we're trying to target a certain depth or figure out what depth they're using. But don't dismiss trying to cast parallel to the shoreline and hit that in that direction, because your lure, once you figure that depth out, your lure is in the zone for such a long period of time, or I should say it's in the correct zone. And never forget, when you catch one, make sure you work that area over carefully. We may not visually see what is holding those fish, but there could be something submerged just out of our sight, and there could be a pile of them sitting on it. So when you're fishing those do-nothing type banks between visual targets and you catch one, assume that there's some more right there. Hey everyone, quick break right here. If you'd like to check out Omnia Fishing, go ahead down below in the comments. Pinned right there in that first one is a discount for 15% off your first order. Good for a limited time only. A whole bunch of great anglers at Omnia. And hey, speaking of shallow cover and shallow structure, if you'd like to watch a video that goes over what I feel makes the perfect shallow cover, go ahead and check this one out right here. And make sure that you go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.